Welcome back in to the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where we have some breaking news in the NFL media world to get to. I'm Brendan Clean. That's Drew Lerner. We're back for you 2 Eastern. It is a Thursday bonus edition of the show, but we're here for you to break down changes at NBC Sports and Sunday Night Football. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. We're here on YouTube and X Live. We're also across all podcast audio platforms, wherever you listen. Let's get right to it, Drew. You were able to put out some additional news building on a report from Andrew Marchand of The Athletic. Big changes afoot at the network that just gave us a Super Bowl, and I think that is not coincidental. I think the timing here will be a big part of what we're talking about, but some structural changes as well as some talent changes to the marquee primetime football broadcast of the calendar. What can you tell us about what's going to be happening as far as we know right now?
Yeah, so first off, we can confirm Andrew Marchand's report from last night that Tony Dungy is likely out at Football Night in America, NBC's primetime pregame show to Sunday Night Football. There could be some sort of emeritus role there. We don't know, but it appears as if he will be no longer appearing on Football Night in America. And then new today, we learned that it seems like his two co-hosts, Jac Collinsworth and Rodney Harrison, who appeared on that 3-person studio that would travel from site to site during Sunday Night Football, are also unlikely to be back next year. Now, I want to make clear, nothing is finalized by NBC. They have not made this official, but sources familiar with the show, it is their understanding that that studio is going away and the show is going to look a lot different next year. Marchand got into that a little bit in his reporting that the show plans to be on site for Sunday Night Football next year with its primary studio. We don't know what that studio is going to look like yet, but that is a big change. They had traditionally done that show from their Stamford, Connecticut headquarters, and only the trio of Dungy, Harrison, and Collinsworth had actually been on site. So look for that to be a major change. But yes, it looks like it's going to be slimmed down, which I think, we've talked about a lot on this show, Brendan. Yeah. That cast was a bit unwieldy. There was 10 full-time analysts and hosts on that show. And for a show that is just really something people tune into for maybe 15 or 20 minutes after the late afternoon NFL window ends and Sunday before Sunday Night Football begins, that's a lot of mouths to feed in such a short period of time. So I think NBC realizes they needed some structural changes here.
Sounds like a lot of talent contracts were ending coming off of that Super Bowl. Of course, if you are an agent and a rep trying to get your talent onto this show, you want them to be there through the Super Bowl. It was a little bit of a gap between NBC Super Bowls, and so that all makes a ton of sense. But this show had been strangely large, and I think unwieldy is the right word for it, for a while now. They had not only the 2 desks that you talked about, where those 3 who are likely on the outs were on site, but we also had Maria Taylor along with 3 analysts in Stamford at the desk, along with a fantasy analyst in Matthew Berry, some insider and newsy stuff from Mike Florio. And it was something that you felt like no one really was getting an opportunity to shine. The show didn't really breathe. These studio shows are already so fast-paced and condensed, and this just amplified the worst problems with a lot of those shows, in my opinion. We don't know what NBC's reasoning is. Of course, they haven't confirmed. They're not going to explain that, but that I think you and I have been critical of for a while now. And you look at the basketball side, Drew, and this is something I had noticed before this news came down, right? Where they've brought that show on site, even on outside of the Sunday night basketball broadcasts. They have had Carmelo Anthony, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter, sometimes they're cramped in a corner of a court while there's a halftime show going on. And honestly, even the Scalabrinis and the Dohertys and the Jordan Cornette, like the B and C teams, often have traveled, and you can tell across the whole industry, but especially at NBC, that appears to be quite a priority. They've put Bob Costas on site for a lot of these big broadcasts lately, and you would expect that to continue. So it feels like we're going to get some version of a Maria Taylor anchored on-site show as the sole thing going on for these Sunday night games. And you would hope that would give whatever analysts are along for that ride a better opportunity to really make an impact and an imprint on air, and hopefully just make the viewing experience less chaotic, because it's just distracting, I think, as a viewer, and it has been for a while.
Yeah, I think you're right. Is like the only thing really guaranteed at this point, and I don't even want to use that word really, but Maria Taylor will likely be the one anchoring whatever on-site show is happening. We do not know the contract situations for the rest of the analysts. Devin McCourty, Jason Garrett, Chris Sims, those are the three primary panel analysts alongside Maria Taylor at that Stanford studio. We do not know what their contracts look like. Andrew Marchand did report last night that, quote, many of the analyst contracts for Football Night in America were up after the Super Bowl. We do know at least one, Matthew Berry, who has served as a fantasy analyst for the show. He's been public that his contract expires this year, so we do not know his future on the show. And I think this is really just an opportunity for NBC to kind of completely refresh here. I think if we look at the rest of their live sports properties, from studio shows to the game broadcasts, as you mentioned, Brendan, like they deservedly get a lot of praise. Sunday Night Football is probably one of the best presentations of any major NFL package on the air. They just came off a wonderful 2-week Olympic run that was capped by a U.S. men's hockey gold medal that Mike Tirico completely aced in the studio, and Kenny Albert aced on the broadcast. As you mentioned, their NBA broadcasts have been really praised recently from both the studio and the game perspective. This was really the one knock you could have on NBC Sports' live coverage on any of their major packages. And it looks like they're taking means to address that.
They've been very star forward with a lot of their recent hires. And I think that at least colors my perspective on where they might go as they refresh this Football Night in America show, right? You look at the basketball studio that I just mentioned, which Carmelo Anthony was one of the biggest names to be nabbed by any of the new NBA broadcasters during this latest musical chairs that we saw. Baseball, they've brought on reportedly Clayton Kershaw as well as Joey Votto. And you just have to imagine, sorry, wait, did they get Kershaw or is that Netflix? I feel like I'm doubting myself now.
It's Kershaw, Votto, and Rizzo.
Kershaw. Yeah. Rizzo's the other one. I got in my head.
Yeah.
And you even look at Caitlin Clark joining the NBA desk for that appearance. Michael Jordan, of course, this nebulous and undefinable role that he has had. It points to what I would imagine will be something that is more geared toward a handful of far more household types of names going forward. That's not to say that I'm predicting or that we're reporting that everyone who had previously been involved with Football Night in America will be gone. But if you look at what Marchand said and you see some of the names in particular that we know figure to be available, that would, point in that direction to me, Drew. And I think that's where I want to go next, because we've known Mike Tomlin is kind of the belle of the ball, so to speak, right now in the NFL media world. He has not made a decision, at least as we know of yet, as to where he might broadcast, or frankly, if for sure he will broadcast next year. Most assume it will be Fox because they have the Jimmy Johnson slot open, and people have pointed to Jay Glazer relationship. I don't know if that really matters, but that seems to be the leader in the clubhouse there. But we have, Travis Kelce. We have a lot of these new coming current players who seem to be ready to make the jump, whether you're talking about Cam Hayward, who was on NBC's Super Bowl pregame coverage, Kirk Cousins. We don't know what his future in the league will be. I think he's about to get cut. Kyle Van Noy, I saw on Colin Cowherd's show recently. He does a lot of media stuff, and he may or may not, get a contract this offseason. Feels like that generation is kind of ready to jump, with Travis Kelce leading the way, depending on what he decides to do. The problem, though, for me, Drew, is like a lot of those names I just listed off, it's not a given that they're even available right now or will be. And so aside from Tomlin, who feels like the no-brainer, obvious guy to point to, I don't necessarily see somebody where, the Carmelo Anthony equivalent, the Clayton Kershaw equivalent here. Unless I'm missing somebody, I'm not sure if NBC is going to be able to go out and do that here, despite what their track record shows they might be looking to do.
I think you're right, and I think it's accurate to say that Mike Tomlin is a complete unknown. I get the sense, just as someone who is a lifelong Steelers fan, that he might want a break. He might not do any TV this year. That is uninformed speculation there, just as someone who follows the Steelers closely. But if I'm NBC, like, that's someone I'm writing a blank check to if they want to come and work for me. A name that you didn't mention that I think is worthy of consideration is Aaron Donald, who did appear on NBC's Super Bowl pregame show and is no longer an active player. I think he's a big enough name that could garner some interest from NBC. I think he handled himself well on his pregame appearance during the Super Bowl. And if he developed into someone that could be a go-to analyst for them, I think that would work out quite well. Travis Kelce, I think you can't really, put all your eggs in that basket, because it's pretty likely that he goes and plays another season. Fred Warner also appeared on NBC's Super Bowl.
And he's been everywhere, but it feels like he's going to be back. He's not that old. Exactly. He's coming off an injury, but he's a great player.
Yeah, and same thing can be said for Cam Hayward. Like, I don't see him retiring this year. So it's almost as if, like, NBC probably wishes this situation happened next year or the year after, because they might actually have a lot more options. And for that reason, again, pure speculation, we're not reporting this, I would expect a substantial chunk of the current analysts, or the analysts that did appear on Football Night in America last year on that primary panel, to be back. Like, I think Devin McCourty has proven himself to be like a really solid analyst. And I think most NFL fans really enjoy his work. I think NBC really has an affection for Chris Sims, just given how much he does for the network and how much programming he fills. Maybe not the biggest name.
The show with Mike Florio. He's one of the more recognizable personalities over there from an output standpoint and a visibility standpoint, even if he's not a huge name.
And honestly, Jason Garrett, I think, is probably pretty well liked within the building there too. He's definitely improved over the years as someone who probably went from, looking at drywall to someone who actually can provide a little color to a game broadcast. So I don't think NBC is eager to move on from any of those guys. If they're amenable to coming back, who knows what their contract situations are. But I do think in the future, like, they're going to be looking to get one of these bigger names in there and kind of boost the star power a little bit for that show.
Agreed. You just look at the rest of the space, right? ESPN probably has the equivalently little star talent, but they don't have a game on Sundays, so their show has always been lagging a little bit. But even then, I mean, Randy Moss is there. Teddy Bruschi's a well-known guy. They're a little on the older side, but those are pretty big. Even, obviously then Fox has Rob Gronkowski now, Michael Strahan, one of the most successful sports media people ever, CBS. obviously just lost Matt Ryan, but at one point they had Ryan and JJ Watt, and they were able to make some big hires from recently retired guys. Even I believe that, if I'm doing my math correctly, I looked at this previously, that Bill Cowher is either a free agent starting now or will be after next season. He has kind of been on 1 to 2 year deals for a little while, as that show has fluctuated with, Boomer Esiason leaving and all that sort of stuff over time. So I think that every other network has been able to land a younger, fresher, bigger star recently, or has one already. And NBC, that's always been a gap for them. But with football, it's also a factor here, I think, too. Donald's a great call, and there's all sorts of people that we've listed here. It doesn't feel like the studio jobs have been all that desirable. Maybe this show going on the road more often will help that. And there's some things you can point to. Obviously, Sunday nights are a great spot if you're going to get one. But, basketball, even baseball, hockey, whatever, those are shows where you get to be on multiple nights per week, and the postseason even more so, and those stretch on for months. Whereas football, yeah, it's primetime on Sunday. You're capturing the day that was in the sport, and that's a big platform, but it's once a week for an hour, and so that only, I think, goes so far, especially in an age where guys have podcasts and live shows and all these sorts of things where they can kind of fill in those gaps. So, you've seen people who, have those other side projects still go into traditional broadcasting, Jason Kelce being the most obvious example, right? But it remains to be seen how desirable those slots are for the biggest of big stars.
Yeah, I do think it is a pretty desirable job. I mean, Football Night in America, and NBC touts this every year, it's the most watched pregame show of any NFL pregame show, right? I think it averaged 8.8 million viewers per episode last year. That is like not quite double what NFL or NFL on Fox and NFL on CBS are putting up, but it's close to that. And obviously that's because it's the only game going on. People are tuning in from both of those previously mentioned networks to NBC to watch it. But like, that is not a small factor here. It is quite a big platform, and I think it's why people have such strong opinions on this show, right? Like, it is probably the one pregame show most people are catching a little part of every single week. You're not always tuning in at 12 or 12:30 to catch the early.
Yeah, that late game ends and you just flip to NBC until the game starts. I think a lot of people do that.
But I do concede to your point that I think, especially since Tom Brady has gone from playing and entered the booth, I think that job is actually more attractive to a lot of players, like, now that they've seen Brady do it. Like, I believe Marchand mentioned in his report that Travis Kelce is more interested in calling games than actually being a studio host like his brother is. Not sure
that personally. One surprises me.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce calling a game. I mean, you listen to their podcast, you kind of see his media appearances. He seems to excel in that laid back, kind of goofier atmosphere. The idea of him rattling off, play by play, but at the same time, JJ Watt, you might have said the same thing about, and he's been great. So,
exactly.
That skill set can be developed.
Yes. And I think that upper echelon of stars like Kelce, Watt, Brady, they kind of realize there's a lot more glory to doing the game broadcasts than it is, being stuck on a studio and you're getting 5 minutes at halftime. Right. So, I think there is a tier of people that, if they want to go up and try the game broadcasts, that's what they're going to do. But I also think there's an equally big, or probably bigger tier of talent, like the Aaron Donald level of former player, that would be a really good fit in the studio. So I don't know. I think it's something to watch over the next couple of years here.
Hey, you never know. Maybe NBC Sports executives saw the rumors that Derek Carr is going to potentially exit retirement and go back to the field and said, wait a second, buddy, we might have something to talk about here. There's tons of people out there who we didn't even name, and all of them would be not newer, younger, fresher, more recognizable than a lot of the folks that have been on this NBC show. Not to say that that is all that matters, but that seems to be the direction this is headed. My guess would be, because they're condensing down, because they've leaned in that star direction more often with their other sports lately, is that we see something that is sort of, maybe built around one personality and one or two personalities more strongly. Probably newer hires. Maybe that doesn't happen right now. Maybe this is a rolling thing over a couple of years of a revamp, and that it probably looks a little bit more like those other shows, which are that, you go to Fox for Terry Bradshaw and Michael Strahan, really, maybe a little Gronk now on the side. Same can be said for the rest. Jason Kelsey's the draw on Monday Night Countdown, right? Like, that's kind of the model. And I think NBC will probably follow it. And being on the road does go a long way. We've seen that really cut through online and just be a better product, I think, across the industry. Well, thank you, Drew, for providing some context on the news. We'll see when this becomes official, what exactly the specifics might be, and what NBC does next as we venture into what will be a long NFL media free agency period here that we will be tracking closely here on the play-by-play. Check us out at awfulannouncing.com. In the meantime, folks, follow us at Awful Announcing across social media. We'll catch you Friday for our regularly scheduled programming.